We're going to start the casino meeting, actually the reconvening of the special committee on Chicago Casino. We will start with the roll call. Committee members, please, those that are on Zoom, unmute yourself. Please note that your yes or present response will be deemed to be a yes vote when this quorum call is used as a reference vote for later items. All right, let's start. Vice Chair Irvin. Present. Alderman Hopkins.
Present remote.
Alderman Dowell. Alderman King. Alderman Hairston. She's here. All right. Alderman Sawyer. I'm sorry, he's okay. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Harris. Alderman Sadlowski Garza.
Present, sir, remote.
All right. Alderman Cardenas.
Present.
Alderman David Moore. Alderman Curtis. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins. Alderman Mike Rodriguez. Alderman Scott. Is that a yes or a no?
He's not here.
Not yet. Okay. Alderman Maldonado. Alderman Burnett. Walter is here. All right. Alderman Taliaferro. Not here. Alderman Raboyes. Alderman Wagasbeck. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Spizzato. Alderman Nugent. Alderman Vasquez. Alderman Napolitano. Alderman Riley. Alderman Michelle Smith. Alderman Kappelman. Alderman Martin. Alderman Osterman.
Present on Zoom.
And Alderwoman Silverstein. All right. Alderman Burnett is here.
28.
Anybody else? Non-committee members. Alderman Quinn. Alderman Gardner. Alderman Cardona.
Alderman Lee.
Alderman Lee.
Alderman Tabarez.
Alderman Tabarez. All right. Well, we're in good shape.
We have 28.
28 members, committee members present. And how many non-committee?
Nos queda checar si tengo positivo esta chingada de la
All right.
COVID.
All right. So we have, obviously, we have a quorum. We have a couple of housekeeping matters today. We have a revised substitute ordinance. All committee members should have received a copy electronically, as well as a printed version earlier today. Anyone need the packets of updated? All right. So Alderman Irvin makes a motion to accept the revised substitute ordinance by the same roll call that was used to determine quorum. Any objections? Hearing none, the revised substitute ordinance is before us. We also have a revised resolution. Again, all members should have received a copy electronically as well as a printed version. Alderman Irvin makes a motion to accept the substitute resolution by the same roll call that was used to determine quorum. Any objections to that? Okay, hearing none, the substitute resolution and ordinance are in front of us today. What I'm going to do is, do we want, just for the benefit, Jenny, do you want to just highlight at least what, in terms of the substitute, the content of that?
Sure.
So that before we get into discussion.
Okay, and I have opening statement.
All right, why don't you start? Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Tunney, Vice Chairman Irvin, members of the committee.
Hold on. Oh.
Better? Better? All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Tunney, Vice Chairman Irvin, members of the committee and City Council. My name is Jenny Huang Bennett, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Chicago. The city has provided a further update of the documents since the Friday, May 20th committee meeting. These updates include clarification that the CFO's authority in the ordinance is related to administering the terms of the HCA that the City Council approves, as was the original intent. To this end, a materiality standard has been added that is based on the materiality standard in other large redevelopment agreements, and the language has been added that states that the authority is as contemplated within the HCA. The commitment to maintain 25% minority investment through 6 years after the signing of the HCA has been added, and this commitment is in addition to the in perpetuity commitment to make commercially reasonable efforts to locate minority investors. Clarification that reporting on ethnicity will be included in the ongoing reporting requirement, which is currently already required by municipal code. A red line of the HCA exhibits to the HCA and ordinance versus the version provided last Monday on May 16th has been provided, and portions of this document have been highlighted in yellow to represent the new language since Friday. Over the last several months, we have met with City Council members approximately 10 times through 4 special committees on the casino meetings and 6 briefings. This has been an extremely thorough process, which is a culmination of 3 years' worth of work since the passage of the legislation in 2019. Chairman, if
Yeah,
you're okay,
why don't
I'm
we get
going
a
to
little bit of historical perspective?
go through that. This can be found in the evaluation report, but on July 26th of 2019, nearly 3
Just
years
FYI,
ago,
Evaluation report dated March 22nd, 2022. It's been obviously sent and probably resent a number of times. Okay.
the city conducted a public survey soliciting community feedback surrounding the casino. On August 27th of 2020, the city released a request for information seeking input from potential operators as well as other stakeholders on critical considerations in the selection process. On April of 2022 of 2021, approximately a year ago, the city released a detailed request for proposals seeking bidders interested in operating the Chicago casino, and bids for that RFP were due on October 29th, 2021. On December 16th, 2021, the city held a community engagement meeting to solicit feedback from the community related to all the various potential casino operators. On March 22nd of 2022, the city narrowed the proposals to 3 finalists and provided the 104-page report that Chairman Tunney referenced. From April 5th through 7th of 2022, the city held another round of community engagement meetings to solicit site-specific feedback on each of the finalist proposals. On March 22nd, or excuse me, on May 5th, rather, a finalist recommendation report was issued. And subsequent to that, a finalist community hearing was held. And then subsequent to that, we've had the series of subject matter hearings and aldermanic briefings that I mentioned earlier. In short, this has been a 3-year-long process that the city has undertaken for the selection of a casino in the city of Chicago. This is a generational opportunity which the city has been working towards for over 30 years. The casino will generate $2.7 billion of financial value to the city and nearly $3 billion of financial value to the state. This one casino project will pay for approximately 9% of our $2.3 billion pension contribution and reduce the likelihood that the city will need to raise property taxes in the future for pensions. The majority of the funds created by the casino will bolster police and fire pension funds and secure the retirements of the men and women who keep this city safe. These benefits don't even include the broader induced and indirect economic impact created by the casino project and jobs created. This casino will generate approximately 6,000 well-paying jobs, with 3,000 of those jobs in construction and 3,000 within the casino operations. As I mentioned before, time is of the essence. In the latest estimates, the city is facing at least a $300 million shortfall, and we are currently in the process of closing that gap in anticipation of the budget process that will start in August. Key decisions are being made about how the city will address that gap in the upcoming budget, and this ongoing structural revenue stream is critical to that process. Even more importantly, we need to allow the operator to submit their application to the Illinois Gaming Board as soon as possible in order to hit our milestones for opening and revenue generation. The minority targets negotiated in this agreement are amongst the most aggressive targets nationally and exceed those of other large developments in the city. On minority ownership, most casinos nationally have no minority ownership. The city has more than doubled that requirement to 25% ownership. Bally's has taken a step further and committed to a crowdsourcing mechanism which will allow everyday Chicagoans the opportunity for wealth creation. In conclusion, please remember that this is the beginning of a process. In any large development, the next step of the process, which is the planned development process, is when the city usually just starts getting to vetting a project. But we have to start somewhere, and the proposal before you for your approval will allow the city to get started on building a casino after over 3 decades of non-execution, lost opportunity, lost jobs, and lost revenues.
Samir, would you identify yourself and make your opening statement? And before we do that, just a couple other housekeeping. Alderwoman Austin has joined us. We
Alderman
ha-
Sawyer. and
Alderman
Coleman.
Sawyer, Alderman Coleman, and then for the benefit of the committee, Alderman Cardona is a member of the Casino Committee, having replaced Alderman Maldonado as a Vice Chair of Pedestrian and Safety. And then just before we get started, Alderman Sophia King, did you want to make a statement? Where's?
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to address my colleagues. I want to share with my colleagues, why I will be refraining from debate. I'm taking a Rule 14 out of an abundance of caution because my husband is a partner in a law firm that has or is representing a casino operator. I'm also prohibited from discussing this with the administration or my colleagues further. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Lopez, did you want to be recorded as being here for the meeting?
Yes, sir, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, Samir?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samir Mayakar, Deputy Mayor for Neighborhood and Economic Development. I'd like to thank Chairman Tunney for his leadership and the amount of time and dedication he's put into this process, Vice Chair Irvin, similarly, and all of you members of the committee. Jenny covered a great deal of detail on this. I think the main point I wanted to stress is we are really in a place where this has been 30 years in the making, and it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to support economic recovery, create intergenerational wealth, shore up our pension finances, and develop a world-class amenity to support sectors that were hugely impacted by the pandemic. As you undoubtedly have heard in public comment, we have not recovered the over 180,000 hospitality jobs that represented the economy, the economic base pre-pandemic. So we still have a ways to go. And as Jenny mentioned, I know a lot of your concerns in some of the earlier briefings were around process and, is this the only crack at the Chicago casino from a legislative perspective? But there's still a planned development process ahead of us, the city licensing process, and of course, the IGB approval process. This project comes at a time of
Just say
tremendous...
who the IGB is.
The Illinois Gaming Board process. So the project comes at a time of tremendous volatility in the global economy. And there really is a tremendous opportunity here to set us on a path for structural budget, to balance the budget structurally, which is important to the business community and all of us. It's good for the business environment in Chicago, and it's going to keep us nationally and globally competitive. Just as a reminder, New York is currently exploring a casino RFP, and peer cities that we compete with for visitors, for businesses, for tourists, like Sydney, London, Singapore, they offer gaming. So we've heard your questions and concerns over the course of this process and the number of community engagement sessions we've hosted, and we are very confident that the agreement in front of you and what will come in the PD and licensing processes will address those issues. We completely agree it is important to get this process right, and we need to do what 30 years of leaders have failed to do. We know Bally's Chicago is our chance to make a statement on the future of the city, and we look forward to today's discussion. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Samir. And both to Jenny and Samir, I've gotten to know both of you better, for good, bad, and ugly, whatever. But it's been an honor to be your choice and the mayor's choice for leading this casino committee. Obviously, all my members know my hospitality background, the restaurant, hotel. I wasn't casino trained, but I guess I have a course in it in these last 6 months. I wanted to highlight, as chair of the committee, some of the work that I've been doing behind the scenes, doing a lot of research. I went to the first, I wasn't involved since 2020, but since December, I've been actively involved in looking at that point, the 5 finalists. 3 basically were in and around McCormick Place, and then 78 obviously on the near south side, and then also Bally's on the near northwest side. I actually was impressed with all the all the people that, well, I want to step back 1 second because originally the legislation had too high of a tax rate for casino people to even negotiate. So we had to go back down to Springfield and get a more reasonable tax rate, which at this point is about 43%. But I think it was much higher than that, and there was relatively no interest at that high rate. But that being said, the 5 finalists, the 3 of them around McCormick Place, for a number of reasons, just didn't work for MPEA or were not fully baked in the case of One Central. I'm going to ask Jenny just to work with me and just say, you know, from practical purposes, why did the original McCormick Place and those around McCormick Place, why did they really basically fall out of favor?
So McCormick Place had conducted a survey of their largest clients, convention center clients, and through that process determined that there were 2 very important factors that would be necessary for a casino to be adjacent. One is that they preferred not to have a disruption of the convention itself. And the contiguous space nature of certain of the proposals meant that there would need to be adjustments for that consideration. But in addition to that, to the extent that the existing facilities were used for a convention center and a casino, at the same time, that replacement space would need to be provided. And so to that end, the replacement space aspect of it presents certain challenges because McCormick Place is fairly highly utilized, even with the Lakeside Center, especially as you compare it to industry standards. And finding a replacement space can be very expensive. It's expensive, especially given the current state of the convention center business. And so, you know, we can go, you know, in more depth, but ultimately those are the main considerations.
You know, because I think a lot of us felt that it would be a natural for the old McCormick Place, you know. And that being said, I'm sure we'll do some Q&A if there's questions specifically about that. But that being said, the previously approved PDs, both at the 78 and at Bally, were huge developments that passed the city council, and very complex, very dense, with commensurate traffic studies and such. I think what probably sold the day for the mayor and hopefully with us at the city council was the fact that, you know, Bally's had a number of things going for them. I think they led the leadership in regards to they really wanted it the most. They've never been in the market. They'll have no competing ventures a la, you know, the other 2. They've initially set the bar in regards to the $40 million upfront payment, which, by the way, in the ordinance, this $40 million is dedicated towards pensions. So there was a question from a number of committee members at that time. They the first to really establish labor peace. Others had followed, but I think they set the tone about how important it is in listening to our committee about labor peace. And that agreement is an agreement that's been signed. It's not part of the ordinance or the resolution because that's between private parties. And but there's total confidence that we're going to have a labor peace agreement for not only the construction but the operations. And I think you mentioned it earlier that they really have provided the highest percentage of minorities, not only in working, construction, operations. I know it's in the report, and we can delve into it, but they really set the tone and did something innovative in terms of the equity ownership. You want to talk a little bit about the crowdsourcing idea? I know that we have Mr. Reynolds with the Hard Rock, who was obviously with the Native Americans, had really the highest in regards to that, but talk a little bit about that for a second.
Sure. As I mentioned in my comments, the minority targets are some of the highest in the country, multiple times higher than many other casinos. But beyond that, it's not just about the percentages, but also the values demonstrated. In particular, for Bally's, they proposed a crowdsourcing mechanism so that not only would investors be able to buy in at low dollar denominations, so you don't have to be a millionaire to be a part of this project, but that the sourcing of that would also be done in a way where you don't have to know somebody to be a part of the project. So, that's ultimately what the intent of the crowdsourcing mechanism is, to be able to create some more equity by way of participation and then ultimately help support generational wealth.
So Jenny, you talked a lot about finances. That's obviously your bailiwick, and I don't want to repeat, but one thing that I don't remember if you said today was we've been without a casino for 25 years in practical purposes. That annual shrinkage or loss of potential revenue is how much on an annualized basis?
So the state of Illinois sends $331 million in gaming revenues to the state of Indiana, and our expectation is that approximately 190 will be repatriated back to the city of Chicago.
Right. So a number of the meetings, Bally presented themselves as not only the permanent site, but the temporary site. Can we talk a little bit about, I know that the option for Medina and the Sheraton were on the table, but as one who went to most of these meetings, what happened late in the negotiation process with CDOT in regard, or Samir, you want to answer that question?
So with all three of the finalists, as you saw in that evaluation report, there was a significant amount of due diligence conducted on their permanent and temporary sites. And when we looked at the Bally's temporary site at 700 West Chicago, as was originally proposed, there was a significant amount of overlap due to the CDOT planned construction schedule of the Halsted viaduct improvements and the Chicago Bridge replacement and widening. Given the simultaneous timing of that CDOT work, which the schedule had changed over time, but I think we now have clarity on that based on the procurement timeline, supply chain issues, and other factors. Having that occur at the same time that a temporary site would be open while a permanent site would be constructed was going to be, pose some transit challenges in that area during the construction phase. And so as we mentioned in the evaluation report, we'd encourage all of the finalists to look at more central city locations. The Sheraton and the Medina were both mentioned, and Bally's was able to come to an agreement with Medina, and a very thorough transportation analysis was done on that site as well subsequently.
Okay. Okay, so we've been joined by Alderman Taliaferro. Chris is here. Alderwoman Haddon is here. Who else? And in regards to hands up for questions, I have a little bit of process here in terms of how I want committee members, the sponsoring alder persons to talk. So we'll get to everyone's questions unless it's a question of process. Gil? Okay. All right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the security plan, especially in my mind around the Medina Temple. And there's an adage with certain studies that casinos can be safer, more eyes on the street, less vacancy. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because that's come up quite a bit.
Well, if I might start on the issue of vacancy, that submarket has over 25% commercial property vacancy. This is a challenge pre-pandemic, and of course the pandemic accelerated that trend as more people were shopping online. So, anything that can be done to enhance tenancy through our commercial corridors will help provide more eyes on the street, more commercial activity, more spillover economic benefit. And by having that spillover economic development benefit, there will be less security issues as well. That's what a number of studies show, that, ultimately having tenancy is vital because vacancy can create security hazards.
Jenny, you want to talk about the dedicated budget for security around this temporary site?
Sure. So the Bally's Corporation is going to pay, by way of community benefits, $2 million a year The $2 million a year during the time of the temporary will go towards public safety in and around the Medina Temple. During the time of the permanent, $1 million will go towards public safety, and the remaining $1 million will be determined based on community input upon a process led by the alderman. In addition to that, we know that Bally's is also dedicating approximately $5 million annually in their budget for security, which is both for inside, but also in and around their location. And so that security will also help to support enhanced public safety in the area.
And like other events, traffic control aids will be paid for by the casino itself and not a strain on our budget.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. One of the issues that come up certainly around the permanent site is, obviously I said it was a previously very dense office, residential and such. Going, as Samir said, I believe we're going to go back to the Plan Commission. There's been a good faith effort in regards to Bally's to reduce the square footage of the pre-approved plan development for this change of use for the hotel and the casino use. Do you want to elaborate that a little bit?
Yeah, Chairman Tunney, I know Alderwoman Smith had asked about this in our previous briefings. So there is a written commitment as provided through the chair to all of you that Bally's at a minimum will reduce the total square footage for development by 2.4 million square feet as part of that plan development process.
Make sure that I went through. Okay, so I'm going to ask Vice Chair Irvin, would you like to say a few words in regards in whatever you want to discuss?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Deputy Mayor Myakar and CFO Bennett. One of the items, I saw that you made some adjustments on the component about the minority participation and adding the 5-year stipulation back. One concern, and we talked about that I do have, and under your calculation or under your statement of a material difference, I am still concerned about the crowdsourcing and how it ultimately will play out. If the crowdsourcing doesn't work under IGB rules, how do you think we would deal with minority participation at that point? Is that something, in your opinion, that would be a material difference to bring the agreement back to us?
Well, I think the first, kind of response I would have is that there have been initial conversations between Bally's and the IGB, and they understand, what it is that we intend to do by way of the crowdsourcing and the wealth creation. Whether or not we can get there and how that fits within the rules is something that we'll have to work through as they make their application to the Illinois Gaming Board and work through that process. To the extent that for whatever reason the current construct doesn't work, I know Bally's has floated a number of other ideas by way of how we can get to what is the ultimate goal, and it isn't really just about crowdsourcing per se, but about equitable sourcing of equity participation, so that you don't have to know somebody to be a part of this project. And so they are committed to that and whatever variation that does work for the IGB, and obviously we'll take their lead on what's allowable, but mostly to say that they are dedicated to that value.
And have they given any inclination as to how they may get there if that does not meet logically with the IGB? Is there any inclination? How do we get there to speak on exactly what you just talked about?
Right. Well, crowdsourcing in a lot of ways is about how you market and let people know about the opportunity. And so there are different ways that can occur, whether it's traditional crowdsourcing or whether it's, more broadly how it is that we make others aware of the opportunity to be a part of this project. We do want to ensure that whoever does become a part of the project does meet suitability requirements that the IGB may impose, because ultimately they'll be owners in a project that'll be highly regulated. So we'll work through that balance with them as well as the IGB.
Okay. Second point, in relation to the socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, if our memory serves me correct, we have a new map for that.
Yes, there is a new map. It's in the through the chair request. that was sent on May 19th. And
that's-
it's basically the same construct as the original map, but just updated for the new census data.
Okay, and there's no material difference in previous from the 2010 to the 2020 census?
The data has changed and the demographics has changed, but no material differences in the approach to the way that that map was created.
Okay. And that will suffice for all percentage-based hiring that Bally's would do at the site, both construction and post-construction, permanent?
This requirement is for the construction aspect of the contract. Post-construction, the hiring requirements for operation is 60% minority and a prioritization of Chicagoans.
Oh, okay, not necessarily a prioritization of the Cedar residents.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. That is all that I have for right now. If I have any other questions, I'll raise my hand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you for your efforts and attendance. We were pleasure working with you. You know that. All right. I think one other question before I'm going to ask Alderman Burnett to speak. As I mentioned earlier, all hell breaks loose. We got a real problem here, with Bally's. Something's wrong. What happens, since we're investors in this, basically, what happens, how do we make sure that there's a continuation of gaming activity and, of course, revenue to our budget?
So to the extent that, and thinking of worst case scenarios, to the extent that we were to have some sort of issue with our counterparty here, which would be Bally's Corporation, the city has negotiated liquidated damages within this agreement. Those liquidated damages would occur if it is that the completion of the project weren't to occur in the timeline that's laid out in the host community agreement. They are fairly high liquidated damages and ones that we're there to ultimately protect the city in that event.
Alderman Irvin, did you?
I did have something that I forgot about. A lot of people have talked about this akin to the parking meter fiasco. Are there any ways that we, the city of Chicago, would have to pay dollars to Bally's in any way, shape, or form for not meeting certain economic standards or not hitting certain revenue targets or anything of that nature that we're under with the parking meter deal?
No, there are no true ups and no contingent
Okay.
payments that the city would make to Bally's. The bulk of the agreement here is in essence a negotiated tax rate, which the state statute effectively negotiated for us, which as Chairman Tunney mentioned earlier, means that we're in essence equity shareholders in this enterprise. And so in a lot of ways, our incentives are aligned with Bally's in terms of the operation of the casino.
Okay, thank you. Apologize, Mr. Chair.
All right. I forgot to identify people in the box. So starting with Noah, do you want to identify yourself for everyone in the room? And no, you do for the remote, for the virtual. Mm-hmm.
Hello, Noah Safranek, Assistant Commissioner with Department of Planning and Development for Plan Developments and for Plan Commission.
Good afternoon, Vig Krishnamurti, Deputy Commissioner with the Chicago Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon, Kim Kopp from Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister, outside gaming counsel to the city.
John Sobel, Head Transactional Lawyer, Department of Law, City of Chicago.
Sid Freilich from the Taft Law Firm, Kim's partner, outside counsel of the city.
Thank you. And obviously we have our City of Chicago employees that are outside counsel and all development costs are being paid for by Bally. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Do we know what, at least to date, that's rough sum is?
It's approximately $4.6 billion. Million.
Yeah, well. Yeah. All right. We got it. Okay. over the question from.
This is to date since over the last 3 years.
Okay. All right. Okay. Alderman Burnett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Rather than to make a statement now, I'd rather acquiesce
To seek to
to,
close
yeah,
after.
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So in the order, let's see, do we have in the audience here? Start with questions. And I'm gonna yield to Alderman Riley since you are okay, great. All right, I just want to make sure that the alderperson of the casino and the temporary casino are heard for sure. Okay. Is that okay by the committee? All right. Alderman Riley on round one. Now, our hope is to try to reconvene the council at 3. So, yeah. Alderman Mike Rodriguez.
Just for our comments.
Well, I'm going to give first round for whether it would be Burnett or Riley, 15 minutes. At 10. Okay. But again, looking back in, we're already at whatever time. So we're going to do our best. All right. Okay. Brendan.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to, obviously we got a lot of new information over the weekend. In fact, we got it this morning. Responses to questions through the chair. I think those were all made on Friday. We got them this morning. I appreciate getting them. Wish I had a bit more time to process them. What I've noticed, though, is that each one of the committee hearings that we've held, Chairman, where we've asked pointed questions and made statements, the administration has come back with changes and adjustments. So I'll give them kudos for that. But it also makes the argument to continue the public process before approving this. Every time we meet, this gets a little bit better. And so again, certainly by no stretch is this there, by my opinion, but that's why we have these public meetings. And it wasn't Bally's coming to the conclusion on their own that they needed to have a labor peace agreement. They came to that conclusion after our first meeting of this committee, when a number of us, including me, said not only should it be built with union labor, it should be operated with it. And there were no firm commitments on that date for that to happen. So I'd say the members of this committee deserve the credit for getting that project labor agreement signed and a labor peace deal signed, because we demanded such. And I would expect that no casino proposal, whether it's Bally's or any other, would progress through this committee unless there were a labor peace deal involved. So I just wanted to clarify that. Speaking of the project labor agreement and the labor peace agreement, there was an attachment in the agreement that describes Unit B inclusion units for the LPA. And as I read that, those are full-time and part-time drivers, valet, shuttle bus, limo, and then parking employees, if they're employed by Bally's. Is that correct?
That's an agreement that was made between separate private parties. The city's not a party to that agreement.
Okay, it's in your exhibit, so I'll assume it's correct. Here's my question. So if we have a temporary casino with no parking whatsoever, how many parking attendant jobs will there be at the temporary site for our partners at Unite here? If we're relying entirely 100% upon remote parking garages, how many jobs is that for Unite here in the first 4 years?
I can't speak to the number of jobs.
The answer is 0, because there's no parking on site at Medina Temple. There are a number of excluded positions involved in this labor agreement. It excludes nightclub employees, spa and health club employees, off-site laundry, reservation agents, concierge, business center employees, and guards. How many positions in total does that cover, these excluded positions?
Again, that was a private agreement. I can't speak to the positions that are unionized or non.
Can Bally's speak to that? Is Bally's here?
I know they're on the call.
Okay, well, maybe they'll get back to us.
Alderman Riley, can you repeat the specific positions, and I'll try and give you an estimated count here while we're on the call?
Sure. Nightclub employees, spa health club employees, off-site laundry, reservation agents, concierge, business center employees, and guards. Those are all the non-union jobs.
I think he's looking for the number of non-union.
So should I keep going and then allow him to answer? I don't want
Chris,
to delay.
Chris, you
my
want to
colleagues.
identify yourself for the record, please?
Oh, yeah, Christopher Jewett, VP of Corporate Development for Valley. So I have nightclub employees, spa, offsite laundry, reservation.
Concierge, business center employees, and guards.
We'll take a look and get back to you here shortly.
Thank you. I also wanted to talk about the revenue projections. That's been a subject to debate here. We have this union gaming analysis. Some of us trust, some of us don't. I don't. And according to the revenue projections, the casino is supposed to generate $200 million a year to the city at some point. What year does the city hit that $200 million?
The first year would be the second year of operations. So that's 2027.
2027. Second year of permanent facility operation.
Permanent facility operations.
Got it.
And just to be clear, the revenue projections are not just based on union gaming. We had evaluated over 8 different revenue projections from 8 different consultants as a part of this process.
Okay. Well, and that may be the case, but we've been presented with one study. And as aldermen, we have. So if I were to just do some layperson's math here to get to that number, this casino needs to generate about $550,000 a day in taxes. For that to happen, the casino would have to win $1.4 million a day, all 365 days per year, with no accounting for snow, protests, crime, January and February in Chicago every year, et cetera, et cetera. To win $1.4 million a day, considering casinos pay out 95 to 99% of every dollar wagered, and assuming conservatively this casino does great and the casino wins 5% of the time, you multiply 20 times $1.4 million daily, and that means the casino needs to handle $28 million a day, every day, 365 days a year. And assuming every patron wagered $3,000 daily, which is never going to happen, the casino will need to see 9,300 patrons every day of the year. Given the number of casino positions, that's not likely to happen. So since that is in my view, some pretty fuzzy math, would Bally's be willing to guarantee the city a baseline of $200 million in annual revenue after 2027, holding taxpayers harmless if these projections are woefully overstated? Is Bally's willing to hold us harmless as taxpayers?
Jenny?
Importantly, the gaming revenues that you cited, it's only $129 million that annually in that almost steady state that comes from the casino itself. So it's actually closer to $353,000 a day on average in terms of revenues generated from the casino. The bulk of the other revenues are actually generated from property taxes and the improved value of the site from its current site as an underutilized industrial site to the new proposed development. In addition to that, as we've noted in some of our previous subject matter hearings, having a minimum annual guarantee and requiring an operator to provide us with a guarantee of revenues despite whatever the economy may be in the future ultimately has the benefit, or has the detriment rather, of reducing the upfront value to us as well as the ongoing percentage that the city makes.
Understood.
And that's the reason why we negotiated a percentage.
I understand, and I guess we're putting a real premium on the upfront value, because I'd rather the taxpayer have a longer term guarantee that these projections are actually worth the paper they're printed on. And as it stands today, I'm not getting that. And you're right, 200 million versus 220 million. My point is, you need to have this casino jam-packed nearly every day of the year, performing at the highest level conceivable. And in reading the Tribune and the Sun-Times and Cranes, and they look at how other casinos in the state are performing on revenue, this casino is going to have to be on super steroids, because it is crushing them by your projections. And I think that for the taxpayers, and that's our job, is to look out for them, that is a serious concern. But I'm going to move on because I want to keep timing. It's not necessary for a rebuttal.
Chairman,
I'm asking
just a
questions,
question.
Chairman. I'd like to get through them.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
and then,
Because that wasn't a question, it was a statement.
Well, there's just a correction, though. I said 129 million, not 220. So it's actually half of the revenues that you stated.
No, 129 is not half of 200.
No, it's
Um,
nearly
all right.
half. It's 129.
I'll move
you
along.
get the point. Okay.
So on the minority commitments, minority hiring and investment, Alderman Irvin went to this, and I think it requires some follow-up. If crowdsourcing is rejected by the gaming board, what is the alternative minority investment plan? What's the backup plan if the gaming board says this crowdfunding thing is baloney?
So as I stated, the crowdsourcing is about having an equitable opportunity to be a part of this project. So you don't have to know somebody to ultimately have a potential to be an owner. And what that means is how it is that we market and present this opportunity to those who might be interested in it. The IGB obviously will be very interested in how it is that those participants end up being suitable, but it doesn't prevent us from being able to market to those more broadly.
So I noticed you made some changes and clarifications to CFO authority, which I think is a step in the right direction. However, despite those changes to address concerns, any consents, approvals, or waivers that are explicitly contemplated by the agreement, the items included in the list of through the chair questions, would not be considered a material amendment or change. And I'll give you two examples. The deadline extensions for construction, even though they exceed 90 days, would be a consent as contemplated under the host agreement, and therefore not material amendment or change. And the second example is, since under the agreement, the CFO is given, for emphasis, sole discretion over MBE, WBE, and city resident hiring waivers, no material amendment or change would technically be needed for a partial waiver of those minority goals either. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes, on the minority percentages, the CFO would have delegated authority. That authority has only been used in less than 1% in historical procurement, as well as redevelopment agreement contexts. And in every single one of those other agreements, there is also delegated authority for immaterial waivers. And then on the extension of the deadline, it is also a common provision for delegated authority to occur for other redevelopment agreements, especially for large mega developments like these.
Well, and again, we can't really do an apples to apples comparison here because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the city, and it's a casino and it's a mega project. I wanted to talk about, because we spent some time on Friday, about the radius restriction. And I think all of us tried a different way to understand it. And I think you provided some clarity, but what would be helpful for me to understand is, will Bally's commit to having the hedge fund, which is named, was it General? What is it?
Standard General.
Standard General. Will Standard General be expected to file a restriction
Yes.
notice?
Yes,
And then they've agreed to do that?
yes, they have.
Okay. Well, we already talked about those things. All right. On the Medina Temple site itself, I wanted to discuss how we arrived there, because I'm still not quite sure how we did. Up until a day before the mayor's announcement, it was contemplated that this would happen near the permanent site. And you've discussed earlier today why you nixed the temporary site being at the Tribune Publishing plant because of infrastructure issues. But there has been some confusion on the record about who wanted to be at Medina Temple. And it has been stated by the administration that no, Bally's really wanted to be at Medina Temple, and that's why they signed this lease. But we have public statements on the record from the chairman of Bally's, who very clearly said, no, this was not our choice, not our preference, we didn't want it, and the city told us to go there. Now, since then, they've been selected by the administration as the winning casino bidder. Of course, they need to play nice with their new friends, and so they've softened that position quite a bit. But all you have to do is Google Bally's Chicago Casino for the chairman's comments, and he said it not once, but several different occasions in different venues. And so I'd like to know who at the city decided it had to be at Medina Temple. There are a million potential locations for a temporary casino. And during the public process, as truncated and insufficient as it was, you heard loud and clear from the neighbors and a lot of business owners too, not a good location because people understand the infrastructure there. They know the safety challenges that already exist there today. So who at the city said this is where the temporary casino needs to be? Because it wasn't Bally's that picked it.
Let's try to get an answer. Okay.
So Alderman Riley, on the topic of the temporary casino, as we published in the report in January, in that, I think, 80-page report, it was identified that both the Sheraton and the Medina Temple were potential locations in the central city, which was identified due to engagement. And the engagement told us that as we think about a 100-year economic crisis and think about recovery and think about stimulating the downtown area that I know folks here know very well needs more foot traffic, needs more commercial activity. We've heard that loud and clear, that there was interest in a potential central city location. Subsequent to that, all the bidding parties and city and people on the city team looked at potential sites in that broader central city area that could handle the type of infrastructure required by a temporary casino, whether that be how load-bearing the floors could be for slot machines, the electrical infrastructure, of course, transportation infrastructure. Through that process, those two sites were identified and put forward in that report that was public in January.
So, but who actually put those two sites in the report?
There's a whole panel of people and departments involved in that report. This was not any individual. There was pretty broad consensus.
Do any of them live downtown?
I can't speak to that.
So maybe not. Because if you do live downtown and you're aware of those blocks, you know the challenges that exist there. And again, my concern is that Bally's didn't pick this. We let these guys pick their permanent sites, right? Because we didn't want to interfere with the private sector. These guys need to pick the site they want to be at. So when Alderman Hairston asked it a couple hearings ago, why didn't the city council come together on the front end and select a site or two for the bidders to compete for? So we'd have consensus on the front end. We were told, no. To maximize the value, we want to let the casino operators pick their favorite sites. Yet we've heard from the winning bidder here, or soon to be, they didn't want the Medina Temple site, but they're going there anyway. That sounds like someone forced them to go there over their objections, Chairman.
I get it.
So I don't feel like I'm getting a straight answer here.
We're up. You want to comment? We're end of his 15 minutes for round one, but why don't we just answer that again?
I'll just add to Samir's comments that early on in the process, we conducted a feasibility study around where it is that we would maximize revenues. Critical part of this project is about maximizing revenues for the city and the police and fire pension funds. And in that study, what it determined is that a site closer to downtown would generate significantly more revenues than a site further away from downtown, to the tune of approximately $100 million a year. And so that was part of the calculus. As Samir noted, a number of different sites were put forth, and ultimately through all of the various sites, not just Medina and the Sheraton, but all of those various sites that were provided, there were considerable restrictions as it relates to where a casino could operate. Needs enough of a open floor plan, needs a certain height to the ceilings, needs a certain amount of space for a period of time, needs to have certain accessibility metrics. And so ultimately it was a combination of the process that the city conducted internally, but also the bidders and their review of the various sites that got to this ultimate site.
All right, Brendan, we'll do round two for you. Okay. Alderman Villegas.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Who's monitoring the MWBE? Who's going to be monitoring the WMBE construction as well as the workforce goals? Make sure they're being met.
So the delegated official under the host community agreement is the CFO to monitor the compliance with all of the various terms of the host community agreement. Having said that, the Department of Housing as well as the Department of Planning and Development both share responsibilities over monitoring of compliance for large construction projects, and we'll lean on their expertise in that area given the work that they do in other developments. And then in addition to that, the Department of Procurement also currently does monitoring around addressable spend for the ongoing requirements. And again, we'll lean on their expertise there to do that monitoring. But ultimately, the accountability for monitoring for all of the terms of the HCA will fall under the CFO.
So then you'll be responsible for coordinating with those departments, and they'll be reporting to you as to what the compliance is, what they're actually attaining?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you're going to send that to the city council, or does it just stick with you?
Yes, so their ordinance has a requirement that we report on various metrics of compliance to the HCA on a quarterly basis to City Council. And then in addition to that, that I appear along with a number of other department heads before City Council to report on the reports.
Gotcha, okay. And then on the, this crowdsourcing thing, so besides the crowdsourcing, are there minority investors or that have been identified already? And the crowdsourcing is in addition to?
Yeah, so a component of the 25% minority ownership will be crowdsourcing, and a component of it will be for other minority investors who have already been identified.
Okay. And then this, Alderman Irvin mentioned the CETA map. So this is the map that's being utilized in order to identify workers?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And how did we get, so I'm unfamiliar with this CETA. What does the acronym CETA stand for? I'm sorry.
This is an analysis that the planning department uses for several large developments. It's based on, when you think about programs like the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund and others, they're based on census tract information between unemployment rates, poverty, and a few others. So that same methodology was used to update this for the latest census. And the CETA is for part of the minority hiring commitments.
One more time. Thank you. Is there an opportunity to expand this boundaries here?
Opportunity to expand the boundaries for CETA.
So the socially economic disadvantaged areas are only for part of the minority requirements based on those three metrics. That's what we've used historically as policy here in the city, but there are other metrics used for the broad range of minority commitments that Bally's has made. So it's not, the benefit won't just be limited to these areas.
Is that codified somewhere, or is it just?
So they have the, of course, the MBE hiring both on the construction side, on the vendor side, and that is, on top of anything involving this map. And then, of course, you have the City of Chicago residents and minority hiring commitments that they've made as well that's outside of this map.
So is that codified anywhere?
The minority percentages are in the HCA, and the requirement to hire from CETA is also in the HCA. I think if your question is if the map is codified, it's a map that's determined by the Department of Planning and Development Commissioner on occasion. I know Noah is here, who could also speak to some of the historical uses of this CETA map. But I understand the map has actually been in use for a while now.
It's Noah. The map is based on the census tract data. That's how it's established for the target areas. And then the requirement to use that is specified, as Jenny just said, in the HCA, so that the percentage that they have to hit for those jobs will come from those areas.
Can you talk closer?
Sorry, yes, the percentage will come from those areas as indicated in the red on the map. But the remainder of the minority participation can come from anywhere within the city to still hit those goals.
But could you explain a little bit more what the how are we? What are the measurements for these census tracts? What we identify those specific census tracts?
I don't have that here. I have to get you the data through the chair, but there's a specific set of data that is measured, and that's what's overlaid to come up with those red boundaries. I can look through that from my email and get that to the chair while we're sitting here.
Alderman Villegas, it's essentially unemployment and poverty. There's one other metric it uses, but it's a formula based on those numbers, based on the last census.
Okay. And then on this this JV that's being proposed, is this JV the CCBC? Is this the team that's actually going to be building the casino?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there's not one Latino contractor on this team that I can see here.
I know Bally's is on, and I think they can speak to that, but Chris Jewett is from Bally's is on.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a fair statement. We actually have one of our CCBC representatives, Miguel Descoto, who can speak to that.
Alderman Villegas, Miguel Descoto, Descoto Inc. We are part of the CCBC.
Are you guys actually doing the construction?
It's going to be, yes, we're going to be working on the construction for it. We're not on the design side for this one.
So you guys are the actual contractor then? One of the contractors?
The CCBC will be the joint venture. This is the builder of the casino.
No, I know CCBC is the builder. I'm asking, I don't see any contractors. I know I'm very familiar with Descoto and you guys do great work.
Thank you.
But I don't see any contractors.
There's a number of contractors on there, Brown and Moman, Powers and Sons, Gilbane. We have all been involved in construction and in building projects over many, many years.
So then, Miguel, are you guys a contractor though? That's what I'm asking, I guess.
We do construction management, which is the form of contracting for this. We will be hiring, we will be doing work as well as we will be hiring other contractors to do the work and oversee their work.
Yeah. So again, as it relates to Descoto, I have nothing, it's not negative. I'm just pointing out that there's no Latino contractors. I know that Right Way is a construction company, Ujama is a construction company, Livewire is a construction company, Gilbane is, but I don't see any Latino contractors.
I can assure you, Alderman, that with us being involved, there will be many Latino contractors involved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
And Alderman Villegas, on that last question, so the three variables used for the socioeconomic disadvantage map is household income, poverty rate, and unemployment rate. Based on those criteria from the last census, they pick the kind of lowest 25% of the city, and that's how we get this map, and it's used for a number of developments.
Yes. Alderman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Villegas, just for your information, one of the main things that I did when I saw the CABC or whatever it's called, I went and I spoke to Descoto about, I told him that we need to make sure that there's Latino contractors participating in this. And one of the things, so you know, that Descoto expressed to me that he probably didn't express up here, is that you need to understand that a lot of contractors were on different teams. So a lot of the guys who can qualify to do this was on the Rivers team, they were on the Hard Rock team, and a lot of them had a thing with some of those teams that they could not sign up for another team while they was on this team. So now that those guys didn't win the bid, now it's open for them to have the opportunity to be able to participate. And Miguel assured me that he's going to make sure that there's a decent amount of Latinos involved, contractors.
Thank you, Alderman Burnett. That's it, Gil? Okay. Alderman Cardenas.
Thank you, Chairman. It's good to hear there's going to be a lot of Latino construction companies and tradesmen in this project. I'd be remiss if I don't talk about the environmental piece of it. What exactly are we doing environmentally for the building of this large project? You can walk me through some of the benefits. We're going green. I like to see exactly what we have in store. And then secondly, I also want to talk about the fact that we are building by the river and, kind of a little bit of our climate change action plan is I know we have one now. And I'm talking 20, 30 years from now, the cresting of the river sometimes it's pretty strong. And so what are we doing to ameliorate that piece of it? And lastly, do we have support from Friends of the River as well? Have we reached out to them and got their input?
All right, you heard the question.
Yeah, Alderman Cardenas, in regards to sustainability, Bally's has committed as a part of this, and it's in the contract, that they will at least achieve a LEED Gold status. There's also a point system that they've committed to on our sustainability ratings. They will be complying with the findings of the River Task Force, the River Design Guidelines, and we'll be engaged with those stakeholders as well. So there are a number of sustainability commitments in the contract that they'll abide by. And then, of course, our Chief Sustainability Officer and the team under her will be engaged with them as we get through the next.
But there's no specifics, Samir? There's no specifics right now that you guys can talk about?
Can you repeat the question?
Specifics, and you said LEED Gold, but.
So there's a point system with the LEED Gold classification as to how you achieve that. It's a very large menu of options. So that's what they've committed to that. You know, they're going to have to go through the design process and the plan development process on the specifics, you know, what kind of windows you're going to use, the HVAC system in the building. That's all going to be as they actually design the building.
All right, this is an opportunity, you know, state-of-the-art building right by the river, new age. There's a lot of things we've been talking about from a climate change standpoint. And, you know, I just want more information. This is a huge $1.8 billion of investment right on the river. I know we have other like Wolf Point and that kind of stuff, but this is something that is bigger than that. And, you know, we should know more about the sustainability piece. And, you know, we should have had an opportunity for Friends of the Rivers to kind of comment from their perspective and some of the analysis that they've run through, just, you know, an overview of how they see things and what are the things that they want to be, that they want to see included.
All right, we got your point, George.
Okay, Chair. Well, these are very important questions.
Do you have another question outside of environmental?
I haven't heard any answers, but yeah, I mean, those are just very important and germane to the conversation.
Okay.
I'll shut up now, but yeah.
Alderman Cardenas, this is Joanne Vakil with Bally's, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Design and Development.
Hi, Joy.
Hello. To your point, Alderman, we are definitely environmentally conscious. We do design, we will definitely be designing this project to LEED Gold and even better the standards if we can. As Samir was explaining, and we are actively engaged in understanding the point system that the city has with the city's sustainability officer as well. And in addition, in fact, literally at 2:30 today, which is like ironically just right now, we had a meeting scheduled with the Friends of the River. And in light of this meeting, we have had to reschedule that. So we are in the process of finding a new time to have discussions with them. We've actively been engaged in conversations with them with regards to their concerns, how we mitigate that. So we are absolutely sensitive to making sure that we are making this project environmentally responsible.
All right, thank you. As just a small footnote, a number of the meetings talked about bird friendly, and I know that you guys have been working with the birding community in regards to the architecture and design and the glass, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. George, anything else?
Chairman, that's it. I got a lot of would-haves, and then we'll see what happens. Thanks.
All right. Mike Rodriguez. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several questions. You know, Chairman Villegas really dug in on my first issue, so I won't belabor it too much.
Right, let's start with the second one then.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the first one's very important.
Levity. We have to have some levity in the chamber. So
I'll remember that, Mr. Chair. In my 34th minute right now, I'll remember that. No, in all sincerity, I think it's a very important issue, and I'm glad he raised it, and we will be looking at that hard. I'm glad Miguel Descoto is on this call and will be a part of the team here. What will be essentially the commitments from Bally's on reporting back to this esteemed body on the contracting accomplishments in this project?
So Bally's, under the host community agreement, is required to report to the city on a quarterly basis on all of these metrics, including ethnicity. And then I, as the CFO or my successor, would be required to report that on a quarterly basis to city council.
Okay. In two other areas of questions here, around the agreement with the peace labor agreements that Bally signed, my understanding that 5 unions are a part of that: Unite Here Local 1, Teamsters Joint Council 25, UAW, IATSE Local 2, and IUOE Local 399. I wanted to confirm that that was the case and put that on the record.
I think we've talked about the exhibit was erroneously put in because it's a private agreement with the unions. So I don't know if we can answer that on the record. Is that correct? Bally's, you want to opine for a second on that?
I'd have to take a look at the specific union agreements, as our folks outside of myself negotiated those, but we could take a look.
All right. Point of information, Alderwoman Hairston.
It doesn't stop anybody from answering a question, whether or not it's on the record or off the record. You can answer the question, but it may not be, it may not be a correct answer because you're not a party to the contract. And I've heard this said here in this chamber on more than one occasion. So we need to stop making up our own rules, and we need to really start paying attention to what we're saying. Because if I do recall, Alderman Riley asked that we have a court reporter and we get everything so that there would be a record, and that request was denied. And so now when they're asking for an answer to a question, we're saying, well, we can't answer it because it's on the record, when we decided on our own that we would not put anything in the record because that was your choice, that was not the council's choice. I'm done.
Well, let me just say for the record.
Okay, because this is a public hearing, this is a public hearing, everything we say is on the record.
Yeah, we did not, there was not a request for a court reporter. Alderman Riley suggested that we swear in all the witnesses. Okay.
Well, it would be sworn in so that there would be a court reporter.
I'm just saying that.
Okay, let's say,
Alderman
Riley, what was your?
Can I take my floor, please?
Yes.
Yes, I like to reclaim my time, Mr.
All right, we got time. We'll get you.
And listen.
Yeah. Come. Okay. Yep. You. Right. Right. You. Right. Right. We asked. I think Bally responded to the question, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So let's give him some time.
Chairman, I'm happy with the response and I'm happy to move forward. But I am glad that there's a labor peace agreement. And I think it's important for us to raise that up. And I think there was an earlier comment about this esteemed body fighting for that and arguing for that. And I'm glad that it actually happened. So we'll move on. My last piece was around essentially a lockbox for casino revenues going towards first responder pensions. And I think this was a bit of a change in the language most recently, and wondering if folks can talk to that.
So we have included within the ordinance requirement that the $40 million be dedicated to pensions. And then under the state statute, the gaming revenues are required to go specifically to police and fire pensions.
Okay, that's extremely important as we look to be fiscally responsible and make sure that our pensions and our pension promises are there, particularly for our first responders. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Alderman Vasquez.
I'm just make sure this is on. There you go. Thank you so much. So kind of to follow up on what Alderperson Rodriguez just mentioned. So when that upfront payment comes up from the city or comes to the city, when would that then go to the pension? It's not immediate. Is there a process? Is it part of budget? Just for clarification.
It'll be dedicated as a part of the fiscal '23 budget. We get that payment when shortly after the closing of the host and signing and executing of the host community agreement. And then we would reserve that payment to be dedicated towards pension in fiscal year 2023.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I think it's important for a number of us in the council to know that not only what's, appropriated by the state statute, but also that the city and its upfront payment showed the same responsibility. So thank you for that. The second question I have, which is actually the last question I have, is I know there's a lot of conversation about the gaming revenues and the casino portion of it, but in looking at some of the design work, right, it appeared to be also focused on entertainment and other sources of revenue. So I wanted to know kind of how that played into the revenue that might come to the city, or if there's any predictions on what that could look like.
We do have those revenues estimated and projected. It's 212 million by the time you get to 2027, which is the first year of the first full year of the permanent, it's second year of the permanent operation, first full year after the opening in 2026. And then of that, 129 million would be gaming revenues, and the remainder would be through other revenues such as property taxes, parking taxes, restaurant, hotel, and others.
Got it. And then I guess as a follow-up, if I may, this is probably more for Bally's, like when envisioning kind of the entertainment portion, which is separate from gaming, like is there a vision or other entities that are being hired, or how is that something for like the people of Chicago to understand what that might look like?
Chris from Bally's, are you going to? The question is the entertainment portion and how you're going to work on not just the revenues, but incorporating independent venue operators to do some entertaining.
Yeah, so
this has come up quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One on the F&B, we're committed to having third-party operators, particularly based on our theme, the best of Chicago. We're trying to source local restaurateurs that have experience and have a diverse ownership demographic to participate here, as we're going to have to serve thousands of customers a day, and ultimately we know that demographic is going to range and represent Chicago very well. So that's on the F&B side. From an actual entertainment standpoint, we've committed in the host community agreement to work with the independent venues within the city. And ultimately, our goal is to utilize them as much as possible to bring in local acts, regional acts, and national acts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope that as things are moving forward, that we find ways for independent artists, independent businesses to have a shot, right, for that opportunity as well. So that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you very much.
Was there a point of information either from Chairwoman Dowell? Okay, you want to be on the list? Okay. Michelle Smith, did you have your hand up on a point? You asked one. Okay, great. Okay. All right. Next is Alderman Martin. Am I not hearing? Where is Matt?
Oh, he's right there. I thought he had a question earlier.
Did you want? No? Okay. All right. Alderman David Moore. David, are you on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Chairman. So several things. First and foremost, and I'm going to go on record again. Definitely appreciate the PLA and labor peace agreement. But again, I think every labor organization should be a part of that. And so I forwarded information to the city, as well as Bally's is aware of Onyx, which is a federally recognized labor union, and they should be at least part of those conversations. And if any agreement is made between all the unions, they should be included in that as well. So I'm hoping that is done, because just for the record, I cannot support unless they are in part of that conversation. When I know that the least of us are helped, then I know everybody is benefiting. And so that's important to me. So I just wanted to make that statement. I've had conversations with the city. They're assuring me that that's going to take place, but it has to take place in order for me to support this. The other part is if somebody can help me understand it on the sports wagering side. Are they subject to all of the sports wagering rules and regulations that we dealt with when we passed the sports wagering with the sports facilities, and are those monies also part of going towards pensions?
Yes, they are subject to the same requirements under the Sports Wagering Act. And I believe those monies are not dedicated to police and fire pensions.
Okay, so those dollars will go into the general fund?
Yes, that's correct.
And are there any projected revenues from those?
Yes, there are. They're very marginal. In terms of sports wagering, it's a very small percentage of casino revenues. It's roundly about less than 2%, and I'll have to get a precise number.
Okay, please get that number for me through the chair. I saw in one of the sections in the host community agreement that they have to come before contract oversight and equity on a quarterly basis. Is that just reporting, or if there's something found that they're not meeting the MBEWB requirements, can something, what is it that can be done by contract oversight and equity to hold them accountable, or is it just a reporting?
So importantly, as a part of the host community agreement, we negotiated liquidated damages to the extent that that Bally's did not meet the minority targets within the agreement. And so to the extent that that doesn't occur, we do have, in essence, liquidated damages that we would charge them.
So it's just charging money, not demanding or requiring them to meet them. So if they not meeting them is just, hey, I can just pay this and get out of it. Is that what we're saying?
No, I should have said at the start, we first would ask them to meet those requirements. We do require that they enter into a recovery plan as a part of it. And there are a number of steps that the city does require in the agreement for them to meet the minority targets. And then in addition to that, we have liquidated damages.
Okay. And then from the crowdfunding, and I saw it and I read in there, how they're going to communicate, and it seemed like it's a heavy lift. Do they have someone hired, or will they be hiring someone specifically to handle all of this outreach and education and all of that in terms of the crowdfunding? Because that's 50 wards that you have to hit. There's many organizations that you have to meet. So there's going to be a designated person for that, and have they hired that designated person yet?
I can speak to what's in the HCA, then I'll also pitch it to Bally's to respond to their hiring internally. We have required within the HCA a requirement that Bally's hire someone to be point and in monitoring the minority requirements. In addition to that, they are also, to the extent that they're not compliant, required to hire an expert independent advisor on how it is that they can ensure that they meet those requirements. And then Bally's can speak to kind of where they are in the process of looking for somebody to be able to monitor the minority requirements.
Tracy,
Representative from Bally.
I was gonna say, Tracy, do you want to touch upon the diversity monitor, and I'll touch upon how we roll out the actual equity?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Tunney, Vice Chairman Irving, members of the committee and city council members. I am Tracy Wiley, the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. So thanks for your time today. And in answer to your question, our plan is to hire a Director of Community Engagement. We want to make sure that we have someone there in Chicago on the ground that's a part of the community that can speak to some of the concerns and things that we've discussed today, but certainly to ensure that there are innovative practices in meeting and marketing to the communities that are in and around the casino. So yes, we do have plans for that, and that would start almost immediately once decisions have been made.
Okay, and with that said, for transparency, do we get to submit recommendations of people, and if so, who do we give that to?
I'm going to defer this question to Taft, our legal counsel.
Sid Freilich from Taft. The ethics regulations around the statute that was passed could make that problematic. We were in the process of putting together a memorandum for the council as to what could and couldn't be done relative to recommendations. The statute is drafted very, very broadly, and we don't want to have a foot fault. So we're talking to the Illinois Gaming Board, and we're going to be back to you shortly.
Okay, and so, and I'm saying that because I'm very transparent, so there's times people are not watching this, they don't hear it. And so if I myself cannot say, hey, these are some people from the community that, we can recommend, not telling them to hire. So what am I allowed to do? You're saying you guys are going to put that together, because I don't want them next week, they have hired somebody and, we didn't have a chance to say, hey, here's some possibilities, not telling them who to hire, but just some possibilities of some folks that we know would be, good for that in our communities.
Recommending constituents generally to look at the website.
Oh, you have to use your mic. I can't
Sid,
hear
I
you. I'm
can't hear
sorry.
you. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Recommending constituents in terms of specified people is probably problematic. Recommending to Bally's that they hire constituents in your ward, perfectly okay, as long as it isn't, please hire Mr. Jones.
Right, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Alderman Sawyer, point of information.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, specifically to this question, in the event if there was a waiver requested and Alderman Moore knew somebody that was in that field where the waiver was requested that could fill that void, would that be acceptable under the current ethics or amended ethics requirements? Specifically for that purpose.
Understood. We're going to have to get back to you, unfortunately, Alderman Sawyer, because the statute is so broad that it could be interpreted any way under the sun. So we're checking with the state, frankly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right.
Okay, and I think,
Alderman Moore.
I think my last question, I hope
Alderman Moore,
it
can I
is.
just, sorry to interrupt you, but just to close the circle, maybe 2 points that Tracy might not have touched upon, one of which I was going to take. The first one is we would plan to, and we're working through our regulatory council and our SEC advisors, so Securities Exchange Commission, to ensure that the rollout of this is fully compliant with all the securities laws in both the state and from a federal standpoint. And the plan would be to hire a firm to help with the rollout of this and ensure complete compliance, ideally in partnership with the Illinois Gaming Board, as we talked about. We also had earlier today, we just started the process of taking a look at diversity monitoring firms, as we actually called this out in the RFP. There's a handful or more of firms that do this for city and state projects. So we've already begun that process as well.
Okay, I think I got all that. I don't know.
All right, David.
All right. So my last question, I hope, if not, I'll do a round two. Oh, you don't? All right.
Come on.
Anyway, so this casino, like other casinos, are open to the public, correct? No?
Yeah.
It's going to be open to the public, but there are requirements for who can enter. For example, you have to be over a certain age, so on and so forth.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking this is because please.
All right. David, continue, please.
Throughout our city, and especially near that area, we have a homeless population. And if many of my homeless friends and people that we care about who collect coins and they decide they want to try to press their luck, would they be discriminated against in going into these casinos? And if not, how are we going to handle the homeless population if they're going into the casinos?
I'll start with a response, but I'm going to also then defer to Bally's on this. But ultimately, the IGB does put restrictions on who is allowed to enter into casino, like I mentioned.
I didn't hear that clearly. You said who put restrictions?
The Illinois Gaming Board. One example is by way of age. But then I'll defer to Bally's on some of what they expect to be the operational practice of that.
Chris, do you hear the Alderman's question about admittance and managing the site in regards to maybe homeless around the site?
Yes, Chairman Tani, this is Amit Patel from Bally's. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. This is Amit Patel from Valley, Senior Vice President of Regional Operations. Alderman, to answer your question, we will have the same policies and procedures in place as any private corporation would have when it comes to solicitation on premises and behaviors and that we would encourage or discourage. We'll be working with the local law enforcement agencies about making sure that our patrons have safe and sound environment to play and have a good entertainment throughout their stay with us. But outside of that, there would not be any specific discrimination against any single individual to enter or leave the casino.
It's very hard to hear, but I guess if I need to know a plan, because I mean, we have homeless people who are down, and they now we're gonna have a casino, and if they feel that they can press their luck, I need, and so if they're coming in, they may not look up to par, they may not smell up to par, but they may not be disrupting people, and they're just saying, hey, I want to come in and try to hit that million, you know? So I guess my question is there going to be some type of written policy to how we address and handle this so that we're not getting hit with discrimination suits because, you know, or saying who can and who cannot come in since it's open to the public?
Yeah, we
I'm
would
not clear
not.
on that by your answer.
Sure. Alderman, we would not have any discrimination specific policies against just homeless. We have very specific policies when it comes to when people enter, they have to at least abide by the norms of dress codes and behaviors that we would allow for every patron. So whether you're homeless or not does not necessarily constitute whether you can enter the casino or not. They'll be allowed as any other patron would be.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. All right, we're going to hear from Alderwoman Dowell, followed by Alderman Osterman, followed by Alderwoman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question as we are considering the casino, and I think I just want to have answers to this question. The administration stood up a email address, Chicago Casino at cityofchicago.org. Can you give me some information on the metrics of that, Samir, like the number of responses over what period of time? How many of the responses were specific to one of the 5 RFP responses? The number for and against? And then if you could give me a breakdown or some understanding of some of the qualitative responses, some of the concerns raised by the constituents regarding any of the proposals. Do you have a report on that?
Alderman Dow, we used that public engagement tool to heavily influence some of the questions that Tina Hone, our Chief Engagement Officer, raised in the community engagement meetings. We do have a log of this, and we'll kind of work through the chair to get those responses to you in terms of the metrics and the qualitative summaries.
Can I get them before we actually vote on this?
We will check with our team right now.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Alderman Osterman.
Jenny, question related to reporting that you have to do and the future council requirements. It was suggested, I think, by Alderman Hopkins about the continuation of this committee. I would hope that we would do that as a council, and I would hope that the reporting that would be required to you would also be required to that committee. Alderman Tunney is having so much fun with this. I think his continued service or someone else's, I think, would be a worthy thing, at least until, I would say, a year after the permanent building's built. But I think that's a question related to an openness on the administration's part, but I think also something that the council would take up.
Sure, and I'm happy to report on a quarterly basis, to the whole council. We'll also put it up on the website that we've created for really all of the documents related to the casino, and I will defer to the chairman on the committee and plans for that.
it's the will of the body on the casino committee, but we also have the committee on oversight, don't we, as far as the council. So I can see the reporting mechanism going to either of those two. Never mind, probably finance at some point if it needs to be there.
Okay. The other relates to the question relates to the temporary site at Medina. When would we envision that be up and running?
And for how long?
The temporary site is currently projected to be open Q2 of 2023, and under state statute is limited to 3 years, 3 years in terms of operation after an extension period.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And my reason I'm asking is the issue of safety and a safety plan. If I'm not mistaken, I heard the answer earlier when asked about a safety plan. The answer was that Bally's is going to give $2 million. $1 million would be a community benefits agreement that would be used in the area around the casino. The other would be $1 million that would go towards security. Is that accurate?
So during the time of the temporary, the 2 million would go towards public safety in total.
Okay. So I think that that's a good step for the folks who live and will go to the temporary site, but it's not a plan. And I think that leading up to that opening, I think the alderman who has that ward, the surrounding wards, this full body needs a fully vetted plan that they understand, and that people that are going to go downtown, businesses that are half a block away, understand that plan inside and out. It's very transparent, that everyone understands and everyone is in agreement on. So I think that I don't expect that by the time of this vote, but that will be an issue that will come up again in the fall during budget, and I think we will raise prior to it opening again. So to all involved, I think there needs to be a fully vetted, transparent safety plan that we're all in agreement on.
Yep, and that's the intention of the next stage of this process. What we're asking for here is to select Bally's as the operator so that they can get to work on that plan, as well as working with the IGB, who also will require a public safety plan as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Smith.
Yes, thank you. I want to go back to a question I asked the other day, and I hope you can give me more details, which is on our pension obligations. So I asked at the last meeting, can you please compare how much we're getting for the casino with our expected pension fund contributions? But I think what I was really asking is, can you please account for what our sources and uses of pension funds for the police and fire pensions are? And I know you have that information available. We get it at budget time office. So, so can you please walk us through that so we know what the gap is and how much of our pension obligation this casino, which was supposed to be the gap filler, is actually going to be contributing?
And Alderwoman Smith, is your question related to just police and fire, or is
Well,
it
just police and fire, right? Because the casino is supposed to be police and fire. How far are we from having sources of funding that are almost entirely properly allocated towards municipal and laborers? I understood that between 911 and water and sewer, that those were basically covered. Is that?
No, actually, so the pension fund that has the most corporate funding right now is municipals.
Yes.
Laborers also has a significant component that's corporate funded. But if you're asking about police and fire, in fiscal year 2022, it was approximately $22 million that was funded from the corporate fund. There is roundly about a $60 million increase on an annual basis to police and fire in terms of contribution increases, which accumulates on top of itself year after year. And so I can get you the precise numbers. We did provide these numbers through the chair as well.
But how much is paid for out of property taxes? I want to, like, for this year's pension contribution, how much is property taxes? How much is, I'd like for police and fire. Those are very distinct buckets. And it's a very large contribution in total, so.
So for 2022, the police contribution was $799 million. For fire, it was $399 million.
Right.
The police pension payment was approximately $4.7 million paid for out of the Chicago Midway Enterprise Fund, $13.8 million paid for out of the Chicago O'Hare Enterprise Fund, $780 million paid for out of the property tax levy. And then on fire, the contribution was $5.5 million from Chicago Midway, $20 million from Chicago O'Hare, and $352 million from the property tax levy.
And how much from property taxes? 300?
$352 million.
So, and then in the future, as we're still climbing the ramp for police and fire, is that right?
We have climbed the ramp for police and fire, but annually there are increases that occur, largely due to COLA increases, but also how it is that the experience study comes out, the mortality experience of the members, the retirement percentages, et cetera, as well as the investment performance.
Okay, so in 2026, so we've got stated here that revenues for pensions are supposed to be 53 this year, 24 in 2024, 36 in 2025, and 107 in 2026, 130 in 2027, and 2028, 140. Okay, so once you figure those in, how much other than what we are already doing from property taxes, Midway on O'Hare, what gap will there still be left?
So just by way of the increase in the pension contribution between 2022 and 2028, notwithstanding the funding sources we just described, it's a $180 million increase in police and fire pension contribution between 2022 and 2028. And as you noted, it's $140 million of gaming revenues in 2028. So, and that doesn't even consider the corporate funded component that we already pay in the current fiscal year.
So that means in 2028, we'll still be short about $40 million.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. That's exactly what I wanted to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm just going to note for the record, our council meeting will not start at 3. It'll hopefully start at 3:30. Okay. All right. Alderman, I'm sorry, Harry, you had just a quick point of.
That I didn't want round two, but for purposes of budgeting, will there be a special fund for casino revenues, or is that going to be, when we get to budgeting in one place, so it's for us to manage?
We'll create a designated allocation. I can't tell you exactly what fund it is going to be or what it's going to look like, but there'll be a designated place for you to see the casino revenues.
Thank you.
All right. Alderman Wagasbeck.
I'll just go to just one question then, and it's more about the process again. For the plan development, just looking at the process there, when we're in the plan commission, it is the developer that is now presenting to the commission. Since this is a sort of a joint effort here, who is going to be presenting at the plan commission? Will it be Bally's or will it be the city?
Well, I see Noah is not here right now. But my answer to that would be, it would be some combination, I think, of both of us, since it is a joint partnership at this point, assuming it passes city council.
Okay. And then that's pretty much what I was looking at. And then within that, as you know, we have community impact assessments that we have to go through. And there's a laundry list of issues there that are addressed. Will that process be the same? Will we have to go through that whole community impact assessment? Because I think it'll add a lot more to maybe more questions, definitely for the plan commission, but it has things on there like what are the existing theater, sports venues, music venues, outdoor theater venues, and then as well as what is the impact on libraries, schools, et cetera. So that'll all be answered in that.
That's correct. And the same process for a major PD amendment that any other developer would go through would be applicable here.
Okay. No exceptions. All right.
And then Alderman Wagasbeck, I would also just add, we've also started conversations with outside researchers so that we can start taking a look at impacts as well, both before the casino as well as after the casino. So
Okay.
we're also, aside from the PD process, taking a look at impacts.
Great. I'll follow up on the rest later, Chairman. Thank you both.
Thank you. Alderwoman Haddon is a non-member, and her hand is up. And then we'll go back to Alderman Riley if I don't see any other.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Alderwoman?
Hi. Just a couple questions. One, more process-wise. The timing of this decision, I think we've gone through a few times. You guys have answered in previous meetings even, like, hey, if this committee and then if council don't approve this, right, here's what would happen to the process. And I think I've heard both Jenny and Samara, you guys speak to the sooner, right, we can get this going, the sooner we can start benefiting from the revenues. But I just wanted to clarify, is there some statutory deadline by which we need to meet before this process automatically has to start over, right? Is there a reason why we're kind of moving heaven and earth in the schedules to get a vote on this today or this week?
There's no statutory deadline, but what we've said in the past, and I'll repeat here, is that the city is in the process right now of making decisions and planning for the upcoming budget process. That kicks off with the budget gap number in August, but we are in the midst of financial planning now, and community engagement is also going to start fairly soon on that budget process. But also, very importantly, we don't know how long the Illinois Gaming Board process is going to take, and to the extent that does take longer than expected, we need to allow for the applicant to begin that process as soon as possible, and also, frankly, answer a lot of the questions that have been asked here today.
Gotcha. So then, thank you. Secondary question, totally different space. We've seen the plans, the committee has made their recommendations on this Bally's and this location. I know we've talked a lot about the locations. One of the things that's really been missing for me in so much of this, even though most of it's been really compressed in this 2-month time frame, is how does this fit into the vision for the city? Right? We've got this whole visioning process. We're trying to do a new city plan. And I know we've talked about the business aspect and the financial piece, and these things sound really good, but it just as a bigger question is like, what does this fit into our bigger plan? Why? I haven't heard a lot from planning on this. I'm just curious if you guys could speak to this. And I mean, like 5, 10, 15 years, is this the way that we might be looking at other developments along the riverfront? Like, one of the things I'm missing here is an exciting, forward-thinking vision of what else do we have to look forward to, and what's the context for this?
Alderwoman, on that point, it's important that any large development fits into the planning initiatives, to your comment, and we are going through this We Will City Plan. That's the first city plan in 50 plus years. Many of the pillars identified in that We Will plan that's still in a draft stage are kind of boxes that are checked in this development: community wealth building, commitment to equity. There's a number of factors there, sustainability, but particularly at Chicago and Halsted, this is consistent with what's been highlighted in the North Branch Framework Plan, where you have this transitional zoning. You have industrial coexisting with residential, coexisting with commercial, coexisting with open space. That's something that, certainly Commissioner Cox and the planning team have focused a great deal on, and why I think from a planning perspective, this site was particularly compelling.
And as a follow-up to that, is this more of what we can look forward to along this North Branch area? So again, thinking about the time frame that we're on, temporary site, is phased out in 3 years, new casino opens, and then what's next? Like, do we have something in queue for what's next to help build up this area if this is the decision that we make?
Well, there is a very robust development pipeline, in that area. Of course, there's new entertainment venues. If you look at the Morton Salt redevelopment, of course, there's the Lincoln Yards development that has started with life science anchors. We've partnered with Alderwoman Smith on a study on potential more open space in that area as well. So there are a number of kind of pearls on the string here that are already in the pipeline, and we expect there will be more development there as well. But the key is there is an industrial zone there, there is a residential zone there, there's a commercial zone there. We anticipate, that will be a principle that will be continued, which is in the spirit of that North Branch Framework Plan.
Sure. Thank you for that. And I'll just say it's helpful to hear that, and maybe something in like the larger framework kind of past these decision points that I know it would be helpful for like my residents and maybe other residents in the city to hear as well, is like, what's the bigger plan, right? Like what do we have to look forward to if this is the kind of thing that we're working on? So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Point of information, Alderwoman Smith.
I just want to correct the record here with really all due respect. Some of us worked on the North Branch Framework for 6 years. There was never a mention of a casino on the river. There was never a mention of outdoor entertainment venues with amplified sound of the river. In fact, the one thing that was rejected by Alderman Hopkins of the Lincoln Yards development was an open air stadium that was designed to be used for soccer and for concerts. That was overwhelmingly rejected by the community. So Alderman Haddon, there has been a plan, but it has not included the uses that we are discussing today ever. And I just have to correct the record. If the city wants to take a U-turn, they're allowed to come out and say it. The other thing that I want to comment on is to say, on the one hand, that the reason that you awarded the Bally site is because no one was taking, as you said, Deputy Mayor, that no one was taking this site, that this site was sort of the development plans, the approved PD were not going anywhere. And then to turn to Alderman Haddon and say, oh, but there's a robust development pipeline on this, in this corridor, is kind of contradictory. And I really don't want to get an argument about that, but I just can't let that stand. In fact, the 20-year plan for this area was to turn the Chicago River into an in-the-city nature sanctuary.
Wow.
And for the, aside from the Riverwalk. And so I really appreciate Alderman Haddon. She's a really thoughtful planner. But the truth is, this is not anything to do what was proposed in those plans.
Final comment on that.
Thank you. And I don't need a response.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just done commenting.
All right,
Thank
Alderman Hopkins, I think you have your hand up in regards to that.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I can't get my video to work. But anyway, you've got the audio. I just want to point out another, since we're comparing this to Lincoln Yards and the North Branch Plan. The North Branch Plan really tries to revitalize and reactivate the river. And one of the important components in that we all agreed on was the necessity of access to the river and a sloped riverbank, which is more friendly than what passes for a riverbank now in the channelized Chicago River, which is mostly sheet pilings and a harsh vertical edge. Lincoln Yards is being held to that standard. Lincoln Yards is being told by our planning department that they had to abandon their plans to have a sheet metal piling bank and to activate the riverfront with a sloped natural riverbank that would allow for access to the river. I simply want to point out that the exact opposite is being granted to the Bally's team to develop this casino. We are going against our own guidelines. We are going against the insistence that the planning department has brought forth with Lincoln Yards, causing them to actually change their plans to have additional sloped riverbanks incorporated into the current design and the current building under construction. We've done a 180, once again, two different standards for two different buildings. And obviously cost is the main factor here. It's much cheaper to channelize the river with unattractive sheet piling riverbanks. And the Bally's team is being allowed to do that when other developers are not. And I don't, again, as Alderman Smith said, I don't need a response. I just wanted to point that inconsistency out for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. All right. I want Bally's to just say a few words about the site, its relationship to the river, and its outfacing aspects of cultural restaurant and not just a closed closed scene gambling hall. Spend a lot of time on this one with the community too. Mr. Patel.
Chairman Tunney, I'll have my colleague Joanne Vakil here speak about the design in the building.
Okay, well, you heard the question, comment, criticism.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Tunney. And we have spent a tremendous amount of time making sure that we are developing a project that is going to be in character with the Riverwalk that is being developed along the river, along Chicago River. And we have made efforts to make sure that we have wide walkways that allow for pedestrians, that facilitate traffic. We create street character, make sure that we have uses that are identified that are very complementary to the Riverwalk, very similar to certain sections of the Riverwalk that have already been developed. So we've spent quite a bit of time with the Planning Commission and city officials in developing that, creating food and beverage venues, creating small opportunities for retail venues, options for people to sit down and enjoy the river, or for people to go for walks or people to go for jogs. Also, there are green spaces along the Riverwalk that essentially allow for folks to enjoy the river as it is intended to be. The casino use is at a higher elevation. Obviously, if somebody wants to access the casino from the Riverwalk, there'll be a couple of access points, but it is not spilling out onto the Riverwalk. So we have spent a lot of time with the City Council and Planning Commission to make sure that this is in character with the intent of the PD as well.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to hear from Alderman Riley on round two, and then I'm going to ask Alderman Burnett to speak, unless you want to speak. You want to wait till Brendan speaks second round? All right, Brendan.
Walter just wants to do the final rebuttal. I know Walter. Thank you, Chairman. I'll get through these as quickly as I can. I did want to clarify, though, for Alderman Hairston, who made a point of information earlier about my request to have testimony under oath. It was inherently implied that if we had people under oath, we would have a stenographer or someone here to record every statement so we would know later whether they were true or not. So it's a semantics thing. You're correct. Technically, Chairman, I did request the oath, not a court reporter, but the idea would be they'd come together. Didn't happen either way. I wanted to go back to Medina. Well, actually, no. Before we go back to Medina Temple, right. Based on our conversation about the city's casino revenue projections and it not being 200 million from casino revenues, I went back and redid the math. The numbers are still pretty astronomical, Chairman. $384,000 a day must be made. Casino has to win $1 million a day. They have to handle $20 million a day. And to achieve that $20 million a day handle, that means you need 6,600 or so people gambling $3,000 each a day, or 13,000 gamblers doing $1,500 a day each. I'm not sure where we're bringing these gamblers from, but most folks I know don't go to the casino to gamble $1,500 or $3,000. Again, it's a statement. It's not a question.
Okay.
I don't need a rebuttal.
I know Jenny was getting her
No, that's okay.
figures
That's
together.
okay.
right.
But let's go back to Medina Temple.
Yeah.
So on the traffic study, and I would say it's more of a traffic analysis than a formal study. There is a lot of mention, as is typical in a traffic study, of alternate modes of transportation. And the reason consultants do that is to show that not all the pressure will be on driving and parking. And this report also points to the availability of CTA stops, the red line stops, bus lines, availability of bicycle lanes, foot traffic from hotels, rideshare usage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can tell you, knowing how casinos operate and understanding how many secured parking spots are contemplated for the permanent site, the traffic study that's applied to Medina Temple is deficient. There is simply not enough right-of-way to fit the ride share, the vehicular pickup and drop-off, loading, shuttle buses, charter buses, and limousines around this one block site. It simply does not exist. So I wanted to point that out, and I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of hay has been made about the $75 million in infrastructure investments that will be made around the permanent site, when not a single dollar is going to be invested in improving the infrastructure around the temporary site. And I understand why. It's landlocked. There is nowhere to find traffic relief on that block of Medina Temple. When it comes to parking, this is another concern. Because it's a landmark building and was built so long ago, there is no parking at Medina Temple. The traffic consultant also points out there is ample availability of parking around the site. And the consultant is correct. There are a number of public parking garages near Medina Temple. So that's undisputed. What I'm concerned about is that most casinos, no matter what jurisdiction you're in, place a premium on getting the gambler safely to and from the vehicle. And given they have no internal parking on this site, we're relying on all these external garages around the site. What is the casino's plan to safely get gamblers from the casino to their cars and vice versa? Because there's going to be a lot of cash walking around this neighborhood. Right. Has that been contemplated?
It has. Samir, do you want to talk about that?
Well, we do have the very detailed traffic study here. And what I would say, Alderman, I can defer to our consultants on this. You know, the operational plan around site access, site security, you know, traffic management aids that would be paid for by Bally's, you know, curb management. These are all things that, as indicated in the evaluation report, I know the team and Bally's would look forward to working with you on. These are real issues that have to be worked out through the operational planning for, you know, both permanent and temporary sites. And we have confidence in the traffic study that was provided. The topic on security and partnerships with those parking garages, that is going to be something that Bally's pursues as a part of this process. And let me see if anyone on the Bally's team, Amit or Joanne or Chris, if you want to kind of comment on how you're thinking about the temporary site and access.
Sure. Thanks, Samir. Alderman Riley, just to further Samir's comments here, yes, we will be partnering with the local parking garage operators and see how we can provide a safety and security environment for all of our patrons. If those patrons specifically require, to your point, access to or escorting back to their vehicles, we would be working in those partnership agreements with the surrounding operators to make sure that everybody is feeling safe. To Samir's point, those plans are not, they've not begun today, but we will be having a very concise plan and keeping in mind also that these plans are highly vetted and submitted to the Illinois Gaming Board, who will ultimately approve not only what our safety plans are, but also security around the facility as well, and what we're doing for the safety of the patrons as well.
I appreciate the answer. The reason I ask about these garages is that as it stands today, they're very unsafe. We have a lot of criminal incidents in these garages today, and many of them already have security in place. So I'm glad to hear that Bally's is going to spend some more time looking at that because it's necessary. A related question then, for the temporary site, is it $2 million allocated for security or one? I just want to make sure we have that correct.
For the temporary site, it's $2 million allocated to public safety. And then in addition to that, Bally's has $5 million annually budgeted for security on site for them.
And the $2 million, that's per year as long as it's operating, or is that in total?
That's correct. And I'm sorry, and in addition to that, they'll pay for OEMC as necessary for TMAs.
So the OEMC piece is separate from the $2 million commitment?
That's correct, yes.
So the $2 million commitment would go to police?
It could go to police or it could go to camera. It's ultimately up to the operational plan that we would go through in the PD process between CPD, Bally's, and other stakeholders.
Because there's a big difference between having traffic control aids deployed to manage traffic and loading than there is having police officers, active duty,
Mhm.
securing the block, and having negotiated the Union Station PD that relies very heavily on OEMC and traffic control aids that have not been delivered yet, by the way, that gets very expensive very quickly.
Mhm.
And my concern is that the traffic consultant has already acknowledged the very difficult environment around the temporary site by stipulating you need traffic control aids. Kind of exposes the truth here, which is that that is a constricted site with a lot of existing challenges today.
Just as a point of context, for example, the UIC Pavilion is one where, for example, they also have their own private security. They also, and other sites also pay for their own OEMC and TMA type expenditures that occur with events. But none of them have the dedicated $2 million to public safety that we're adding here. So this is on top and beyond, what other sites have.
I think if you did the math, we have a similar arrangement with Union Station and another with Northwestern Memorial Hospital that I negotiated both of those. I have a question about, a couple questions left, sorry, and they're on my telephone here. One is about ancillary documents. In the responses you sent back from our hearing on Friday, I just want to make sure on the radius restriction agreements, once those are executed, do you plan on sharing copies of those with the body once they've been executed?
The radius restriction agreement,
Yes.
um,
And any other form contracts that are attached to the HCA?
if the city is a party to them, then we would, just as a matter of FOIA and governmental document purposes. I'll defer to Taft on, kind of thoughts on that.
Early, yes, we'd make those available.
Okay, thank you. And there's also some discussion about closing conditions. Since closing conditions can be waived by the CFO under the agreement, what is the current status of closing deliverables? How many are outstanding?
Well, we haven't gotten approval yet, so as of this point, they're all outstanding.
Are you currently negotiating these different closing provisions now, assuming a
Our
passage?
expectation is that as it relates to closing, that we should be able to get to closing within approximately 30 to 45 days.
Do you anticipate any of those closing conditions being waived?
No.
I figured you'd say that. Thank you. And then on the summary closure, you did provide an answer in your response through the chair over the weekend. Thank you. You do mention, though, you qualify, you say, yes, a summary closure could apply, but you mention that it can't be a one-off occurrence or an unrelated incident. I mean, that seems fair enough to me. But then you go a step further and say, summary closure would have to be done in conjunction and conference with the gaming board, given that's a state agency and they can supersede city government on all sorts of things. Is it possible the city would want to do a summary closure and the gaming board says, sorry, we have veto authority. You're not doing that. We want the revenue to flow.
I want to see if Taft wants to answer that, given their extensive dealings with the IGB. You're right in that there are a number of areas where they subvert the home rule. So we would look to partner on an issue of importance like a summary closure. But Taft, do you want to comment on that?
Alderman, I can't imagine a circumstance where the city wanted to close it and the IGB would say, no, you can't. That's not the typical way they've acted. Theoretically, they have that right because the hours of the casino are completely up to them. So theoretically, they could. I can't imagine it would happen in the real world.
Okay. And then in looking at I want to go back to the minority and women ownership. I noticed that I think as a result of committee pressure, the 5-year hold period has been re-injected into the agreement, which is better than where we stood a week ago. Additionally, the updated agreement obligates the developer to use commercially reasonable efforts to assist in the transfer of minority interest to other minority investors. It's my experience from corporate contract law that is the weakest possible language you could use next to good faith effort. Commercially reasonable effort, which is corporate speak for we'll do our very best.
Okay.
Well,
All right, all right.
Then Alderman Harrison corrected me. You couldn't hear her on the record. She said, actually, it's even worse than that. What kind of confidence does the council have that we're going to do better than commercially reasonable efforts to protect minority investors here? Because I think that is a super high priority for the city council.
Well, the commercially reasonable efforts was put in there because what we want to make sure of is we're not creating a second class of shares for minority investors. And when those minority investors, at a time frame when the casino has grown, gotten to a stable state, will want, many of them will want to sell their position and to be able to realize the gains on the investment. And so what we want to make sure of is we give them the ability to do that. And not require them to sell to other minority investors, which would ultimately devalue their investment and create a second class of shares. And so that's ultimately what that commercially reasonable is intended to do, is to say that Bally's will make its best efforts. At that time, there will be no new shares unless, another capital raise is done, that whatever shares they can or however they can through their marketing and through their connections, be able to identify other minority investors to be a participant in the ownership.
Okay, well, Chairman, I'm done with my questions. I want to just clarify one other point because it came up in debate, and that was reference to the parking meter deal. I'm not saying this is the parking meter deal. I'm not even saying it's the same kind of transaction. I'm saying the process that we're going through, this sprint to the finish, and the gymnastics we're doing today. We gavelled in a city council meeting, we recessed it, we're having a special committee hearing. We're gonna be out of this one, go back to city council, so we can make an administrative procedure. So we have to have a vote on this on Wednesday in 48 hours. That is a special circumstance. And in speaking with Chairman Burke, who's been here for 50 years, he's never seen anything like this. So in a way, this is actually worse than the process for the parking meter deal. But thank you, Chairman, for indulging me. And again, I would ask my colleagues, every hearing that we've had, all three of them, has resulted in improvements to this deal. This is your final crack at the apple, folks. And once you let this go, it's a blank check for the administration to finish the work.
Thank you.
Each hearing we've had, this has gotten a little bit better. Why stop now? But thank you, Chairman.
I'm gonna point of information. Otherwise, I'm going to Alderman Burnett to close. Okay.
Point of information, point of clarification. So when you were talking about the minority investors, were you talking about minority as in ethnic minority or minority in terms of having less amounts of the shares?
Minority in terms of ethnic minority.
Okay, so by having an ethnic minority, that lessens the value?
No, that's not what I said.
Casino?
No, what I said is if we require that minority investor to only sell to other minority investors, which is, which we
I
can't
get
do,
that
that devalues their investment,
It devalues whose investment?
that minority investor's investment. So if I, Jenny Bennett, bought into this casino and I was only allowed to sell to a certain other demographic, it limits the number of people who could buy my share and reduces the value of my investment.
But if they're buying it all at the same amount, a higher amount, would it make a difference what their ethnicity was?
No, it matters if you restrict it because it means that they have less demand for the supply of their shares. So that price of that stock would be devalued.
But it doesn't have to be.
It's what would happen because there are fewer people there to buy that share and there's less demand for that
Well,
share.
we don't know that there's that. I'm feeling some kind of way about the racial tone of that. And so
There's nothing there. There's nothing there to say that minority invest and actually contrary to everything I just said in my statement, we want to maximize minority participation and the minority targets on this casino have been the highest of any casino in the country. That's not what I said.
You basically said you're limiting the exposure and the market of who can buy if you're limiting it to other ethnic minority.
And that has a presumption that if it's a minority that they cannot afford to play on the same field.
That's not what that said.
I think it's more of just a supply and demand issue.
Okay, if you say so.
If you limit.
If you say
All right.
so.
Alderman Hopkins, you had a point of information?
No, a round two question.
Okay, quickly, because I didn't see your hand recognized and I asked for Alderman Burnett. So go ahead.
there's a clause in the contract that seems to suggest it would function as a reopener in the event that the competitive environment changes. For one example given is if the state takes some type of action to allow for an additional gaming sort of license that could potentially impact the market. Obviously changing the terms, changing the amount of revenue generated, and this could trigger what the language in the contract is a good faith renegotiation, where we would renegotiate that. But it seems that it's all initiated by Bally's. Is there any companion reopener that we could initiate if, for example, the $200 million in revenue that we're counting on for the pension funds doesn't ever materialize?
It's actually not initiated by Bally's. It's initiated by legislative action by others. So it's not initiated by Bally's.
All right, so then we could initiate that. If we, at some point, recognize that we're not getting to $200 million in annual revenue in 5 years or 6 years, whatever it's going to be, we would then have the ability to go back and renegotiate the deal?
If, for example, if we as a city of Chicago triggered a legislative change, then it would cause for a financial reopening.
Okay, but short of that, short of triggering a legislative change, what if we do not get 200? That's why we're doing this. We're doing this to generate $200 million a year. What if we don't?
Okay, so there is no minimum annual guarantee in this contract. The way the contract is structured as a percentage of revenues of the enterprise so that our incentives are aligned with Bally's to maximize revenues. Minimum annual guarantees in contracts have been renegotiated, especially in difficult times and when contractors can't meet those, and ultimately requires that the contractor also extract value out of its bid in order to protect against that downside scenario. So this contract is ultimately structured really thanks to the state and the tax rate that was passed in the state statute, as in essence maximizing the revenues of the casino project through the percentage of earnings.
I agree with that, but putting all that aside, this is a promise, and that's really all it is. We're basing this on a promise and an assumption from a consultant that we're going to earn somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million a year going forward. And as you mentioned, there's no guarantee, and it doesn't sound like we have any real recourse if it doesn't materialize. And if that is the case, I would agree with my colleague. This is actually worse than the parking meter deal. That wasn't a good deal, but at least we know what we got. And there was no way to back out of that. We got the money, we got it up front, and we know what that is. In this case, and I'll go on record right now, I don't believe we're going to see $200 million a year in 6 years from this. I don't believe it. The numbers don't add up. The type of gambling that would need to occur to generate that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. This would make it the most active and most profitable casino in the Bally's portfolio. We're seeing nothing to suggest that that's going to happen, and our hands will be tied 6 years from now, ladies and gentlemen. We won't have the ability to correct the mistake we're about to make. So I object to this proposal, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
So-
Jenny, quickly before we go to Alderman Burnett.
I would offer actually that one, the parking meter deal was a mistake, that ultimately taking the money up front was a mistake because the money that was determined was much significantly less than the value of the asset. Here, we're taking a percentage of an enterprise, and we are equity owners in this enterprise. Chairman Soo Kim has mentioned this a number of times, but he, in essence, is operating this business for the state and for the city of Chicago. And collectively, we are 42% of this enterprise. So this business, how it performs, we will be percentage equity holders in that enterprise, and that ultimately aligns our incentives in the same direction as compared to the other transaction that you mentioned.
All right, agree to disagree with Alderman Hopkins. So Alderman Burnett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know that everybody want to hurry up so we can get to the meeting and we can get out of here. It's a funny thing because when they first started with all of the casino things, I thought the Tribune site would be the least site to have gotten chosen. So it's amazing that it has gotten chosen. I grew up in this area down the street from Cabrini Green. I saw a lot of things happen in this community about 2 blocks away. But a lot of things have changed. As far as on the river, and I want to commend my colleagues, Alderman Brendan Rowley, Alderman Hopkins, and Alderman Michelle Smith. all of them are advocating for their community, right? And I know Michelle is advocating for a green space over at the Finkel Steel. I know Alderman Hopkins and Alderman Raleigh are doing what they think is with the pulse of their community. But you know, sometimes we have to do things that's not popular all the time. We got to do things what's right and also what's necessary. This is a necessary opportunity for us. We've always said, you know I always said, the city should own a casino. Well, now we had an opportunity to own a casino. We're 42% owners of a casino. This area on the river that was mentioned earlier, when we went through the restructuring of the North Branch, we allowed a lot of things to happen. Matter of fact, I recall it very vividly when I was like holding out, because I said, hey, if we're gonna let residential go there, they had to do 20% affordable before we even had an ordinance for 20% affordable. And they allowed that to go in. And on that Tribune site, we're talking about 4,000 something units that was going to be built there that we voted on, that we all voted on, that was going to be 20% affordable. And then across the street from there, the Goose Island, the Greyhound site, same deal. And also down the street, we have the Morton Salt site, which we allowed to be a venue for entertainment. On both of those sites, they were going to have commercial also. On the Tribune site where the Bally's is being built, we're talking about 8 million square feet, right? 4.5 million of it was going to be commercial space anyway, which is going to have restaurants and all these other things, along with office buildings and the number of people, number of traffic, all of those things along the river. The river was being built up anyway. Even on the Greyhound site, we're talking about a grocery store, an atrium for folks to come in, hotels, businesses, all types of things being built up on the river. So we've been talking about building up on the river already. And guess what? All of us have already voted for the river to be built up. Whether we know it or not, we voted for things to be built up on the river right now. They done already. All of those planned developments, we all have voted on them already. But thousands of people, thousands of square feet of commercial, restaurants, entertainment, all that stuff is happening already on the river. We voted for it already. So I just want to mention that, along with traffic and everything else. And when Bally's came to me, this is a very interesting thing. I feel like I'm in a quagmire because it's so challenging dealing with this. And Alderman Raleigh, I know you wanted to put all of these things on the record and have court reporters. Well, guess what? We got court reporters already. The Illinois Gaming Board is looking at everything we say, everything we do, along with the feds and everybody else. Everybody's looking at this. Matter of fact, I got gag orders that I can't say things or ask for things for the community. It's like it's impossible to. So I got to be general with everything that I say and do, even for my own community. So we can't even negotiate in a normal way that we negotiate and advocate for our neighborhood. I had to send Bally's to the community so the community can do their thing, because I can't ask them for nothing. So, because I can't ask them for anything, right? So only thing I can do is generally encourage them to talk to the community and let the community do what they do, right? And Bally's have done that. And Mr. Kim himself is a minority. He's Korean, but I've met a number of his partners in Bally's, which are, some of them, you'd be surprised, some of the owners of this Bally's are going to be some of the athletes from Chicago, right? That I don't want to mention their names because I don't have it for sure, but there's some athletes that's on basketball teams, football teams in Chicago that all of us know and love are going to be part of this stuff, and that's not even part of the minority.
Right. In closing, Walter, you're still in support of the project?
I'm in support of this project 100%, but I want everybody to know that there's a lot more people involved in these things that we don't even know about. And it's going to be majority, minority from what I understand. And also, as far as the construction part, when I saw the construction team, they had majority African Americans up there. I said, this is not just about African Americans. This is about the city of Chicago. And I told them they need to make sure they have more Hispanics and more of everyone across the city to represent them on this construction. And this is 40-something% minority, the rest percent white, because my community in that area is not just an African-American community, it's a very diverse community, and I represent a very diverse area over there. So we advocating for everyone and for the city of Chicago. This deal is going to help us to be able to balance our budget, but also to deal with these pension challenges that we're going to have in the future. And I don't know what else we can do. If we postpone this, are we going to miss the boat and have to come up with something else in order to make these things happen? And what else are we going to do to make these things happen? I'm not willing to do it.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
15-second point of information.
I'd just like to give Alderman Burnett another 20 minutes.
Yeah, no. We were generous with all our time for all our committee members. So that being said, Alderman Irvin makes a motion, move to pass of the revised substitute, I'm not finished yet, of the revised substitute ordinance and the substitute resolution by a roll call vote. All right. So we'll start with Vice Chair Irvin. We're moving the
You moved the question, aye.
substitute ordinance and the substitute
I'm sorry, I
resolution.
drew a blank there. I was thinking about
That's
something.
an aye for Irvin.
About to make another speech. I was,
Aye?
aye.
All right. Alderman Pat Dowell. What, you want to, oh, I'm sorry. You are in second. Alderman Hopkins is second. Is a no. Alderman Dowell is an aye. Alderwoman King is recused. Okay. Alderman Hairston. Alderman Sawyer. Alderman Mitchell. Rule 14. You want to take the chair? You can take the chair. Okay. There. I don't. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks. I'm not the lawyer in the room, but I'm trying to do my best. Great. All right. Alderman Mitchell, was that a yes? Okay. Alderwoman Harris. All right. Alderman Sedlowski Garza. Alderman Cardenas. All right, we'll keep going. Alderman David Moore. Alderman Curtis. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins. Alderman Mike Rodriguez. Alderman Michael Scott. Alderman Burnett. Alderman Talaferro. Alderman Roboyes. Alderman Wagasback. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Spizzato. Alderman Nugent. Alderman Vasquez. Alderman Napolitano. Alderman Riley. Alderman Smith. Alderman Kappelman. Alderman Martin. Alderman Osterman. Alderwoman Silverstein. And Chair Tunney is an aye. And Alderman Cardona, I'm sorry. Alderman Cardona is an aye? No. How about, I'm sorry, Susan Sedlowski Garza? And was it Alderman Cardenas? No answers for that.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm here. Cardenas is here.
Alderman Cardenas is a aye.
Of course.
Yes or no?
Yes. I said
Thank
aye,
you.
yes.
Thank
Si.
you.
Si,
Thank you.
senor.
All right. All right. Our records show 27 yays and 4 nays.
Oh, no, 3 nays.
3 nays?
3 nays.
Say it again. 27 yays, 3 nays. Hopkins, Riley, and Smith. All right. Can I get a we motion to adjourn? All right. No further questions. Can I get a motion to adjourn by the same roll call that was used to determine quorum? Alderman Irvin makes the motion. Any objections? Hearing none, this subject matter is adjourned.